we can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig. Spider pig, spider pig, does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, we can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig. Spider pig, spider pig, does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, we can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig. Spider pig, spider pig, does.
Oh crap, this is Netflix.
1,000.
Better not use that.
In Dota Dragon's Blood, there are 8 Eldworms which embody the 4 elemental and 4 fundamental forces of nature. Terrorblade's goal is to get all 8 Eldworms and remake creation in his own infernal image. At the beginning of the story, Terrorblade killed Vardrak and stole his soul, so Terrorblade had one of the 8 Eldworms. In the past, a dragon killed Davian's father, mother, brother, sisters, and his entire village. As a result, he became a Dragon Knight and devoted his life to killing as many of them as he could find. Davian is very good at it. He has killed 5 of the 8 types of dragons. But Davian has begun to change in more ways than one. When Terrorblade possessed Vardrak, Slyrak awoke, and Davian helped Slyrak kill Vardrak. But Vardrak's soul never resurrected in the Elder World, so Terrorblade still has control of Vardrak. Since Slyrak was badly injured and dying, his soul was at risk of being stolen by Terrorblade. That is why Slyrak merged his soul into Davian. He did it to prevent Terrorblade from easily taking his soul. So long story short, Terrorblade wants to capture the soul of all 8 Eldworms, and now one of them lives inside Davian. And Terrorblade is not the only character that wants to get Davian so as to get Slyrak. Caden is the only Dragon Knight to have killed all 8 types of dragons, so he is very skilled. His armor is forged from the remains of dragons, so he also has very useful powers for battle. 20 years ago, Caden and 29 men fought Slyrak. Caden was the only man to survive. So for the past 20 years, Caden has hated Slyrak. That is why he tried to kill Slyrian when he found out that Slyrak was inside Davian. At the end of Season 1, Caden found Slyrian, turned him back into his Davian form, and dragged him off. So long story short, Terrorblade wants Slyrak's soul, but Caden now has him. Historically, Caden has wanted to kill Slyrak, but that may have changed. We'll find out soon in Season 2. Before we discuss the ending, let's take a look at Mirana. Mirana was the Princess of the Moon, Princess of the Sun, Princess of Night Silver Woods. But Fimrin stole the lotus flowers from the Temple of Mene. So Mirana left the Night Silver Woods to get back the lotus flowers. The shopkeeper told Mirana to go see a sage that keeps to himself in his tower, and he gave her the emerald which she used to see the tower. But the shopkeeper would not accept anything as payment. He told Mirana that he expects a favor in return from a princess who may be more than a princess. So just like Fimrin, Mirana is special. Maybe she becomes the new goddess of the moon instead of Fimrin, or maybe the goddess of the sun. After all, Mirana's uncle is part of the Helio Imperium, Helio being a word for the sun. Mirana's uncle paid people to imprison her, and the informant referred to Mirana as the usurper's whore. So there's a lot going on with Mirana. Her father is or was an usurper. But what did he usurp? Who did he usurp it from? And how does Mirana's uncle play into this? We'll probably find out in Season 2. Okay, now let's discuss the ending. In order to do that, we actually need to go back 1,000 years. Finran told her friends that 1,000 years ago, Selimene trapped the goddess of the moon in shadow, and Terrorblade referred to Selimene as an usurper. Those two lines suggest that Selimene was not always the goddess of the moon. Selimene presumably usurped the power from Mene during a blood moon. Selimene and the Invoker had a child named Philomena. Philomena was alive when the Invoker raised the tower. It was a warm and welcoming place, but Philomena was sad because her mother, Selimene, never visited them. On top of that, Philomena became sick after visiting her mother. Her health worsened, and the doctors could not help, so the Invoker and Philomena traveled over the mountains to ask for her mother's help. Selimene told them to give her their devotion, faith, and worship, so the Invoker knelt and vowed to give her those things. But Philomena told her mother that she would not do it, that she loved her, but she did not want a goddess. She wanted a mother. As a result, Selimene did not heal her daughter, so Philomena died. For the next 1,000 years, the Invoker was a hermit in his secret tower. But one day, Finran showed up. None of Finran's friends could see the tower, but she could. So she was the first person to find the Invoker's tower in 1,000 years. The Invoker gave Finran a coin, and her friends told her that she looked like the girl on the coin. As that happened, the Invoker was watching Finran from a vision in the water and said, Mene. So it is implied that Mene was a goddess of the moon who Selimene usurped. Since Finran has special powers and since she looks like Mene, the Invoker has come to believe that Finran carries Mene's blood. In other words, Finran may fulfill prophecy, the return of Mene. That is why the Invoker struck a bargain with Terrorblade, 7 souls for 1, Selimene's. So far, Terrorblade possessed one of the 8 Eldworms, Vardrak. The Invoker captured a second Eldworm, Lyrak. So Terrorblade wants 6 more Eldworms, and one has merged itself with Davian. Caden now has Davian, and assuming he doesn't kill Davian, Caden could be a powerful ally. Over the course of Season 1, Davian and Mirana developed strong feelings for one another, so she is another powerful ally. And with her comes Marcy, maybe even Luna as well. Davian also built a friendship with Finran, who has very useful powers, but ultimately, the Invoker may be the most powerful of them all. He gave Davian special armor, so he has built trust with Davian, yet at the same time, the Invoker has secretly made a bargain with Terrorblade to give every Eldworm soul to Terrorblade, and one of those souls is currently inside Davian. Back in Dota Dragon's Blood Season 1, the shopkeeper told Mirana that she is a princess that may be more than a princess. Later on, Mirana was losing herself to some hypnotizing force, but then she heard a voice from the stars saying,
Mirana, you have forgotten me.
The voice then said,
Mirana, remember.
At the end of Dota Dragon's Blood Season 2, Mirana touched the relic and heard the same voice and a similar statement.
Remember.
It turns out, Princess Mirana is the Eye of the World Worm, but what does that mean, and why is she important? In the beginning, there was only the primordial mind, but the primordial mind was divided against itself. The two sides are called the Radiant and the Dire. They appear as the red and blue ore. Oroth is a winter wyvern. She found some of the ore, and it began to change her. When she would wake up, she no longer thought about fighting humans. Instead, she would think about conversing with them. In time, the voice of her Eldworm faded. Oroth began collecting books and writing verse, and she never heard the dragon songs ever again.
But in my solitude, I had the most wonderful thought. I am.
Oroth's thought is similar to that of the French philosopher René Descartes. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So basically, Oroth found the ore and it changed her. It separated her from her Eldworm and she began to live life independently. Something similar happened to another dragon, Kashura. The Invoker captured 5 of the 8 Eldworms this season, including the Void Eldworm named Bisrak. Unfortunately, there was another very powerful void dragon out there, Kashura. Since Kashura is a void dragon, he once thought of himself as the waste between the stars, the black curtain of night against which they burn. But just like Oroth, Kashura found and hoarded ore, and the ore changed him. Kashura came to realize that the darkness meant nothing without the light, so he went in search of its source. All paths led him to one thing, the sun in the sky, which is also known as the world worm. Kashura then realized that all dragons are interlinked with creation, that he, as a void dragon, was just a piece of the whole. That realization sent him into despair, but then he found a princess of the sun, whom he looked at as the world worm made flesh. So he called her the Eye of the World Worm, and he loved her. Over the next 3,000 years, many people have held that power. Kashura always loved them and looked after them.
And in those millennia, I have loved you best, my precious sunbeam.
So long story short, Oroth found ore, and it separated her from her Eldworm. She gained free will and began to read and write poetry. Kashura also found ore, but instead of writing poetry, Kashura flew over the cuckoo's nest. He became obsessed with the sun, and also people with the powers of the sun, people such as Mirana. Kashura told Mirana to give the word and take her throne, but instead, Mirana told Marcy to attack. Kashura restrained Marcy with his void powers, and then she went limp. When that happened, Mirana exploded in light. In figurative terms, Mirana became the Eye of the World Worm, or the Eye of the Sun, and the eye opened. The eye began to see.
You know what awaits you.
Val, my battle with Terrorblade, the beginning of the end.
When Mirana touched Slyrak, he glowed in radiance, then he changed back into Davian. So Davian is now free of Slyrak, and Slyrak has gone to Falfel to do battle with Terrorblade. So, what is Falfel? Terrorblade's goal is to possess the soul of all 8 Eldworms and then remake the world in his infernal image. Early in Season 1, Terrorblade killed the Earth Eldworm named Uldarak and possessed his soul. The Invoker then captured the Water Eldworm named Lyrak and gave her to Terrorblade. So Terrorblade has 2 of the 8 Eldworm souls. Falfel is the name of the prison plane where Terrorblade is imprisoned, and that is where Slyrak has gone to do battle. But will Slyrak win? Or will Slyrak become the 3rd Eldworm soul in Terrorblade's collection? Now, let's take a look at the Invoker. The Invoker partnered with the Chaos Eldworm named Vardrak. Vardrak betrayed 4 of the Eldworms. Vardrak also gave himself over to the Invoker, claiming that it was the fulfillment of his purpose in the cycle of creation, namely chaos. So Terrorblade has 2 of the 8 Eldworm souls. Slyrak is going to Falfel to battle Terrorblade, and the Invoker has the other 5 Eldworm souls. So it begs the question, what is the Invoker's plan? 1,000 years ago, Salamene usurped the goddess of the moon, Mene. The Invoker has come to believe that Fimrin is Mene reborn. So the Invoker tried to get Fimrin to kill Salamene so as to take her divine spark. Unfortunately, Terrorblade had already entered Fimrin's mind and caused her to doubt the Invoker. On top of that, Salamene tricked Fimrin into thinking that Salamene is a good person and a good goddess. So instead of killing Salamene and taking her divine spark, Fimrin brought Salamene to her daughter Philomena's grave. Salamene then absorbed the powers within the hybrid flowers. So Salamene is back. She is once again the goddess of the moon, but she has a problem. Salamene relies on people worshipping her. But towards the end of Season 2, Luna rejected Salamene, saying that she would now follow Princess Mirana, and the rest of the battalion agreed. So Salamene has lost a lot of followers, but she may have gained a new one, Fimrin.
Do you love me?
Let's break that down. 1,000 years ago, Salamene usurped the power from Mene. Salamene was obsessed with power, so obsessed that she wouldn't even heal her own daughter, since her daughter refused to worship her. The Invoker now looks at Fimrin like a daughter, and Salamene asked if she loves her. So basically, we are back at square one. Salamene the Usurper is back in power. Meanwhile, the Koryotavi are drunk off of their rage. They are traveling around killing innocent men, women, and children. Finran tried to get them to stop, but they did not listen to her. And now that Selemene is back in power, more blood is going to be spilt on both sides. In order for the Oracle's prophecy to be completed, Selemene must fall and Mene must rise. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Finran has to kill Selemene. There were a couple subtle clues that Selemene has a little bit of remorse for her late child. So for the most part, Selemene is terrible, but she is not beyond redemption, especially if she comes to look at Finran as her child. Of course, that's just tinfoil for the time being. Now, let's take a look at the ending. The Invoker tricked Terrorblade, so the Invoker now has 5 of the 8 Eldworms. But Terrorblade knows about Finran, and he knows that the Invoker now looks at Finran like a daughter. Terrorblade even warned the Invoker that he is going to exploit that. The Invoker countered by pointing out that Terrorblade's weakness is that he depends on others to affect the material world. Terrorblade has to corrupt people, whereas the Invoker simply trusts people to be who they are. What does that mean for Season 3? Well, let's take a look at the characters' choices in the finale. Orath risked her life to protect her friends. Bram then stayed behind to shield her. Kashura was too strong, so Davian told Slyrak to take his place in the flesh illusion, even though that meant that Davian would be gone for good. But he made that choice anyway. Bram then recruited Caden to the fight.
Big bastard. Tell me everything.
We share a common enemy today, little mouse.
Aesar slaughtered Lagacius, which allowed Marana to get inside the palace. Marana was captured, but Sagan risked his life to free her. Then, Marcy did the same. So Lena died, Orath died, and Marcy died. Sort of. Maybe she is both living and dead, just like Marana. Or maybe they will formulate a dragon's blood potion to resurrect those people. Or maybe not. They may just be dead, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, Davian told Slyrak that flesh isn't ephemeral. Flesh is essential. Davian told Slyrak that life has meaning because it's short. Life has meaning because they are vulnerable, because they hurt.
When we're gone forever. It is why we fight. It's why I fight.
Please, Marcy. Wake up.
Dota Dragon's Blood Season 3 was another home run. Season 3 saw the return of some dead characters, such as Lena and Marcy, and Season 3 also alluded to characters not yet born. The final words of Season 3 were the same exact final words as Season 1 and Season 2, though said by someone new.
Do you love me?
Do you love me? Do you love me?
So what happened in Season 3? In Season 3, they fought Terrorblade at the prison known as Falfell. They defeated him, but in the process, Davian died. So the Invoker had all 8 Eldworms. The Invoker used the 8 Dragon Souls to power the Forge and reshape reality.
Do not mourn the passing of the old world. Embrace instead the coming of the new.
In the new reality, Lena and Marcy were alive again. So was Davian, and so was the Invoker's daughter, Philomena. That was actually why he did it. The Invoker had recreated reality 12,403 times so that he could spend more time with his late daughter, Philomena. In the new reality, the Oracle prophesied that Marana would save what she loved by allowing what she loved to die. And that's what happened. Marana reshaped reality, bringing everyone back to the moments before the Invoker reshaped reality himself. Everything appeared to be the same, and the Invoker appeared to be a broken man. But everything was not the same, and the Invoker was not a broken man. Once everyone left Falfell, he smiled, suggesting that he had won. And in the final scene, his daughter Philomena was alive. So what really happened in Dota Dragon's Blood Season 3? First, let's address some of the easier stuff, starting with the Forge. At the end of the season, Marana found the Archchronicus book. That book held the instructions as to how to work the Forge. As a result, Marana gave the book to the shopkeeper so as to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. In other words, Marana gave the book to the shopkeeper so that no one could reshape reality again. But, for better and worse, someone already possesses that power. In Episode 1, Bram was proud since he had reforged Davian's father's sword, and it was a good sword. In episode 2, Caden told Bram that Bram should not go to Falfell with them since Bram had learned the secrets of the forge, and they could not risk losing them. So Marana gave the book to the shopkeeper, presumably to prevent someone from using the forge, but it appears that Bram already has the knowledge even without the book, so there's that. To play devil's advocate, Caden may have been referring to a different forge, but it's worth keeping that on your radar. It's also worth noting that Caden referred to Bram as father, which is a way of saying that Bram is the new leader of the Dragon Knights. Speaking of fathers, in Season 3, Caden found out that he was a father, and not just any father. Caden is Davian's biological father. When the team first went to Falfell, they were stuck inside individual prisons of regret. Caden's biggest regret related to his lover. 20 years prior, Slyrak had massacred 29 of his men in the city of Lesham. Caden was the only person to survive. After that massacre, Caden never went home, and his wife gave birth to a son. Years later, dragons attacked Davian's village and they killed his family. When Caden got there, Davian's mother was already dead. Caden found her necklace and he gave it to a young boy and told that boy to go to Dragonhold. Lo and behold, that boy was his own son, Davian. In the new reality, Marana went looking for Slyrak so as to ask her his advice, but when she got there, Caden was already there hunting Slyrak. Marana shot Caden in order to prevent him from delivering the final blow. Then, Davian showed up. When he unburied Caden, Caden somehow knew his name.
You know my name?
Caden apologized to Davian, saying that he was wrong, that he should have gone back. So this scene was a clue that Caden was actually Davian's father. At the end of the season, Caden told Marana that Davian looked like his mother. Another clue that Caden was Davian's biological father. And we actually skipped one. Listen to this line here.
Take me to your father.
Take me to your father. That line has nothing to do with Davian and Caden, at least not explicitly. But Fimrin said that line right before the show switched scenes and Davian ran up to Caden as he died. So that line may have been a cheeky little Easter egg.
Take me to your father.
So far, we have covered two big takeaways. The first is that Bram knows how to use the forge, and Caden gave Bram the title Father. The second takeaway is that Caden found out that he was actually Davian's biological father. The third takeaway is related. After Marana gave the shopkeeper the book, she turned to walk out, and he asked her if she had found everything that she was looking for. When he asked her this, she grabbed her stomach, a subtle clue that she is pregnant. Before we get to the ending, we have to discuss the prophecy. At the beginning of the season, Marana ruled as solar goddess of the Helio Imperium, but then they went to Falfell, they fought Terrorblade, and the Invoker reshaped the world. Right before he did it, Marana said one word. In the new reality, Marana got one of the red stones and brought it to the Oracle. All of a sudden, Marana had flashbacks, and she heard her own voice telling her. The Oracle explained to her that the Invoker had collapsed all realities into one, but her voice, a god's voice, had pierced the void. Marana determined that if this reality had been made, then it could be unmade. The Oracle then told her the prophecy.
You will travel into darkness and save what you love by allowing what you've loved to die.
At the time, she did not know what that meant, but over time, Marana began to remember the past reality. She remembered who Davian was and how he had died. She also remembered that Marcy had died in the prior reality, and she was not the only one. Although it took him longer, Davian began to remember the prior reality as well, and so did Fimrin. Similarly, the Invoker's daughter, Philomena, found out what her father had done, and she didn't like it.
My father has done monstrous things. He did them out of love, but that makes them no less monstrous or less in my name.
Philomena came to the conclusion that she didn't have to kill the dragons when using the forge. Instead, she could tap into their power just a little bit without killing them. Her goal was to use the power to do three things. She would bolster the entity holding back the ancients, she would repair the physical structure of the moon, and she would buy time for a permanent solution. In other words, Philomena didn't want to erase the reality and bring back the old one. She simply wanted to prevent a cataclysm in her current reality. Unfortunately, her father ruined that plan. The Invoker flew up to the moon with lotus flowers, and he freed the ancients so as to let the end begin. The moon exploded and rained down upon the planet. The only place that wasn't destroyed was the tower, since the Invoker had put up protection around it. Eventually, Fimrin warned them all that there wasn't much that the Invoker hadn't already foreseen, so they couldn't trick him or outsmart him. Philomena explained that the only way to beat him was to show him the world as it really was and help him to live in it. In other words, Philomena had to finally tell him her secret, that she had the disease and she was dying.
You love him, so tell him the truth and end this.
After Philomena told her father the truth about her disease, they all agreed that they needed to reshape the world back to the way it was. But she didn't know how to do that, not at first. When the Invoker and Philomena had a heart-to-heart, they talked about her childhood dollhouse, how he had built a spectacular one for her. But she had cried because it wasn't the dollhouse that she had wanted, it was the one that he had wanted. The Invoker then commissioned the greatest artisan of the Night Silverwoods to build one for her, and Philomena had sat and watched him work because she wanted to understand it so that she could fix the house should it ever break. And that is when it clicked. Philomena realized how they could fix the universe. They needed someone who had seen it all.
Nothing is beyond repair.
Since Marana was the eye of the worldworm, she was effectively the sun, and the sun is a constant. So Philomena determined that Marana should be able to remember what had existed before. And she did, but there was a big problem. In order to reshape the universe, she would have to destroy the current one. And as a reminder, Daphne and Marcy were dead in the past reality, but they were alive in the current one.
You're asking me to save what I love by allowing what I've loved to die.
In the end, she did it, with the love and support of her friends, and in doing so, she fulfilled the prophecy.
You will travel into darkness and save what you love by allowing what you've loved to die.
Now, let's talk about the big one, the ending, the return of Philomena. Everyone seemed to believe that Marana had brought them back to the same exact reality that they had left. But it wasn't the same. The very last scene showed Philomena repairing her father's tower, which had been damaged when he fought Terrorblade's dragon army. So Philomena is now part of this reality. That raises the question, who did it? As Marana was reshaping reality, Philomena grabbed her father's hand. That might suggest that she was in on the plan, but she might not have been. At the beginning of the season, Terrorblade had 2 of the 8 Eldworms, Uldurak and Lyrak, the Earth and Water Eldworms. Slyrak went to Terrorblade to fight him, but Terrorblade won that battle, so Terrorblade acquired a 3rd Eldworm, the Ember Eldworm. Since the Invoker had already captured the other 5 Eldworms, Terrorblade went to the Invoker in an attempt to make a bargain for those 5. Terrorblade tried to get the Invoker to agree to the deal by asking him to imagine holding his daughter's hand in his own again, but the Invoker said no. The Invoker said no because Philomena would never accept a world made by Terrorblade. The Invoker needed a god to take him to Falfel so that he could kill Terrorblade. That is why he went to Marana and asked for her help. They were hesitant to work with him since he had worked with Terrorblade in the past, so they needed time to discuss it. While they discussed the Invoker's proposition, he spoke to Fimrin about Philomena. During that conversation, Fimrin determined that the Invoker had known everything that would happen, and he confirmed as much by telling her that he had calculated a high probability of the events happening. However, he did admit that there were aspects that he had not foreseen, namely, how he would feel. So keep that on your radar. The one thing that the Invoker cannot foresee is how things make him feel. In the new reality, Fimrin explained to everyone that there wasn't much that the Invoker hadn't already foreseen, so they couldn't trick him or outsmart him. They couldn't beat him at his own game. The only way to beat him was to show him the world as it really was. That's why Philomena finally told him the truth, that she had the disease and she was dying. On back of that, the Invoker appeared to have changed. He agreed to help Marana reshape the universe back to the old one where his daughter was already dead. But, as they did it, Philomena reached out and grabbed his hand. As a reminder, Terrorblade had tried to convince the Invoker to accept the deal by telling him to imagine holding his daughter's hand. And then, she did it. The setup and the payoff. From a storytelling perspective, that had to mean something. Although the Invoker had foreseen most scenarios, he was unable to foresee how things would make him feel. So in theory, when Philomena grabbed his hand, he changed. He decided that he was not ready to give up on his daughter. So, when they got back to the old reality, the Invoker didn't use the Dragon Souls to reshape reality again. So, what did he do with them? In theory, he may have finally agreed to Terrorblade's deal.
You were working with Terrorblade. You had to be. Nothing is stopping you from doing it again. For all we know, that's why you're here.
What would you not do to feel her hand in your own again?
Nothing. There is nothing I would not do.
Then we have a bargain.
My daughter. So be it.
Do you love me?
Who are the Eldworms? All 8 types of dragons in Netflix Dragon's Blood Explained. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Terry and this is Marvelous Videos. Dragons have been part of lore and fantasy worlds for as long as we mere mortals have existed. There's something about these massive winged creatures that seem to capture our imagination. Numerous people have tried to capture the essence of dragons on screen, such as in Game of Thrones or in the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. However, the one series that does a stellar job of portraying these winged beasts as the ancient, slumbering, powerful creatures that they are is Dragon's Blood. Based on the game Dota 2 by Valve, Netflix's Dragon's Blood is set in a fantasy world where dragons roam free, gorging on humans and destroying entire villages and towns as per their whims. This series also shows 8 types of dragon, along with explaining the elaborate lore behind them. Here's a quick crash course on all the dragons one would encounter in the Dragon's Blood universe. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin.
Slyrak bound himself to this tiny creature, made them one.
What is the Eldworm Law? According to the lore of the fantasy world the series is set in, at the very beginning of time there was only the primordial mind, and it's from this same primordial mind that all of creation was born. The planets, the stars, ideas of life and of death, order and chaos. Slowly, as time went on, the mind became splintered, fractured in many ways, and became divided against itself. It split apart into 2 fragments, the radiant and the dire, thought and action, and they battled over creation with such ferociousness that nothing was able to reconcile the 2 fragments. This led to the chaos of the infinite, and no one was spared. Gods, monsters, men and their rulers all sought wisdom in the shattered primordial mind and power from its ineffable madness. However, during all of this, 8 elder dragons, or Eldworms, were born, each representing one element of creation. These higher dimensional beings, known as the 8 pillars of creation, are nothing more than emanations of the actual truth. All lower dimensional beings can only comprehend them partially, but not the entirety of them. What we perceive, feel, touch, think and acknowledge as being a component of the true form of infinity. Regular humans only see the true being's shadow, which is evidenced simply by the fact that an entity from a lower dimension would mistake Slyrak for nothing more than fire. In fact, the 8 Eldworms may not even be dragons at all, but rather flesh illusions, which are aware of their actual selves, even if they're using these dragons' physical forms as avatars. However, they manifest as dragons, which honestly is cool as hell, and we wouldn't have it any other way. The 8 Eldworms are thus the physical manifestations of the actual truth, and not just dragons that resemble gods in these particular elements. They form the framework of reality. However, the scariest aspect is some beings can change the composition of creation by using these spirits to take any form they like. It's obviously difficult to defeat all of them and obtain their souls, but it's not impossible, as is seen in the series. Thus, the 4 fundamental forces and 4 classical elements that the dragons can control are used to categorize all of the dragons in the Dragon's Blood story. All the dragons that roam the earth are physical representations of the Eldworms themselves. There are dragons for each of the natural elements: earth, air, water and fire. There are also void dragons, ionic dragons, luminous dragons and chaos dragons representing the basic forces. They're further divided into groups according to their ages. The lowest rung on the ladder is the hatchlings, who are the youngest, smallest and weakest of the group. However, Davian's Squire Bram remarks that even hatchlings may rip a grown man's face off, demonstrating how vicious they are at any stage. Then we have the Eldworms, the oldest, most enormous, sleepiest and most powerful dragons, followed by Eldworms with a capital E, each of which is a kind that houses its respective pillar of creation in its soul. In addition to all this, a cursory glance at these dragons could lead one to believe that they're all unique beings existing in isolation. However, that isn't the case. The physical avatar of each Eldworm within a certain elemental or fundamental species actually represents all dragons within that species. Keep in mind that they're distinguished from Eldworms, which are simply elderly dragons, and the difference is denoted by the use of a capital E for the 8 dragons who possess the souls. The regular Eldworms are merely further incarnations of the enormous Big 8 Eldworms. They lack their own soul as a result, and this prevents them from becoming awake or aware of themselves until an Eldworm takes on or assumes these soulless bodies. When an Eldworm dies, the soul in the dragon's body simply passes into another dragon of the same kind, thus showing how these Eldworms are nothing but physical manifestations of the pillars of creation. Their bodies and physical forms are disposable, while their souls live on forever. Therefore, when they die, they're simply reborn. The Eldworms make a fair number of appearances in the series, with Slyrak often taking center stage due to his complicated relationship with Davian the Dragon Knight. It must be noted that apart from insane strength, the ability to fly, and their control over the elements, they also have regenerative properties in their blood. Not just that, when Eldworms die, if they're one of the Big 8 and harbor one of the souls of the Pillars of Creation, then the dragon can enter into a blood bond with a human by simultaneously cutting the human as the human strikes them, so that they spill blood together in a weird shared blood cult ritual type of way, and their souls are bonded. This allows the human to gain the dragon's powers along with opening them up to be able to hear the Song of the Thunder. The Song of the Thunder is the way in which the dragons communicate, so the mortal is able to listen to the voices and speak to these ancient creatures. They also refer to humans as little mice, and, well, as far as a size comparison goes, I think they're being very generous here. I'm glad they don't refer to us humans as cockroaches. We see almost all of them perched in a circle that is presumably their meeting ground when Davian meets the Eldworms after being bonded with Slyrak. They're shown to be apathetic and untrusting of humans in general, largely wanting to eat Davian. However, they're highly intelligent and wise. The hatchlings and wormlings are another story, however. They don't have the souls of creation, and thus are just brute beings who live to eat, and do so by massacring human settlements. The 8 Eldworms and their wormlings explored. Because of the fact that each Eldworm is an embodiment of one of the 8 elements of the Pillars of Creation, they each reproduce and generate offspring. How they do it and whether they mate isn't known to us mortals, but what we do know is that they lay eggs and little wormlings hatch from them. Each Eldworm gives birth to wormlings of its own type, carrying on the elemental legacy. Thus, in effect, they ensure that there are 8 different types of dragons that roam the earth: air, water, fire, earth, iconic, luminous, void, and chaos. Let's take a look at them. Ithrak, the Air Eldworm. The Air Eldworm in Dota Dragon's Blood is named Ithrak. The term ether is where the name Ithrak derives from. Latin ether is a synonym for air or atmosphere. As a result, ether can refer to the atmosphere or air above the ground, as well as other related connotations alluding to the upper atmosphere that is less palpable, or the divine air that the Greek gods inhale in their celestial realm. 1/3 of the energy that makes up a storm is made up of the element of wind, which Ithrak and the air dragons can control. When flying, they can use wind blasts to accelerate their already amazing speed through the air. When they pass through enclosed areas like a cave, they can produce wind gusts that typically serve as a warning of their existence. Ithrak and the other air dragons are characterized by their eagle-like body parts. They feature large wings that fold while diving, 5 pointed talons at the tip of each foot, sleek spikes around their bodies, and 5 sharp claws. Wormlings appear to have spikes on their snouts that mimic beaks, but as they mature into Eldworms, these spikes begin to disappear. Every air dragon is a dangerous carnivore. When hunting, they soar at such great heights that they can see the clouds while having a clear view of their prey up close. They follow prey that exhibits any evidence of movement rather than those that remain static because they track their prey by movement. Ithrak is immortal like all Eldworms, as in he can take on new bodies as long as one is available for his soul to inhabit. After passing away, he locates the next oldest dragon of his species and infuses their soulless form with his own soul. However, it's said that they become tougher in both physical prowess and their corresponding elemental powers as they grow and age, rather than withering into weaker dragons. Vardrak, the Void Eldworm. The Void Eldworm in Dragon's Blood is named Vardrak. He is the draconic representation of Enigma, the fundamental of gravity, one of the 4 eldworms that stand in for the 4 fundamental forces. Vardrak and all the other Void Dragons by extension share some design elements with Enigma, such as comparable dark color palettes and violet energy that seeps through the spaces between their scales. They have a tail club that is formed like a vase, which is one of their distinctive features. Although it has the same energy as their body, its function is uncertain. The Void Dragons first appear to be wingless, more so than even the vestigial winged Earth Dragons, but their true wings eventually emerge from their shoulder plates as a kind of enigmatic violet energy. Vardrak and the Void Dragons are capable of controlling gravity and space based on the tools made from their remains. They can regulate their own gravity to enormously increase their own mass, enabling them to attack harder with their enormous tails and other appendages, which is how Caiden's blade, which can multiply his force exponentially, was created. The Dragon Knights also employ Void Dragon remains to craft their portal scrolls that allow them to teleport. This could suggest that Void Dragons can also alter space in order to transfer themselves a long way. They're also able to suck people into their void and capture them with tendrils of the void that shoot out of their bodies. We see many of these powers on display when Viceroy Kashura, a Void Dragon, engages Davian the Dragon Knight in battle for Princess Mirana in Season 2. Like all the other Eldworms, Vardrak's body might perish but his soul is forever. It's simply reborn as another Void Dragon.
You do not belong here, human.
Indrak, the Ionic Eldworm. One of the 8 pillars of creation, Indrak is the Ionic Eldworm whose soul sustains the cosmos. He is the draconic representation of Io, the fundamental of electromagnetism, one of the 4 eldworms that stand for the 4 fundamental forces. Indrak and the species he employs as vessels possess the power of electricity, just like the Wisp. All Ionic dragons are reported to speak exclusively in absolute truth, according to one claim. Interestingly, Indra, the ancient Indian god of lightning, thunder and rain, inspired Indrak's name and its lighting-related motif. Indrak and the Ionic dragons have bites that carry electricity, the elemental power of their particular dragon type. Thus, they wield their elemental power just like any other elemental dragon. Even after they pass away, this static power remains active, because even their skeletal remnants retain electrical qualities, which Caden employs to great effect as an electroshock weapon. Ionic dragons can't lie, according to Caden, a Dragon Knight in the show. What this signifies is currently unknown, but who knows if it will be significant in upcoming seasons. Indrak, like all Eldworms, is immortal in the sense that he can take on new bodies each time he dies, as long as one is available for his spirit to inhabit. Lyrak, the Water Eldworm. Lyrak, the Water Eldworm, also goes by the names Mother of Oceans and Mother of Storms, and she has the ability to control all types of water. She resides on the summit of a cratered mountain beneath a lake, whose still waters are surrounded by a field of grass and flowers. All water dragons presumably reside in water or near sources of water. Imagine an ancient Loch Ness monster. That's what I'm placing my bets on. We don't see much of any water dragons all through the series, as much of the action takes place on land, so we only have a few clips of Lyrak herself to go off on. The features of Lyrak, and thus by extension all the other water dragons, are quite aquatic in nature. She has webbed feet and blue skin that is reminiscent of the ocean, both tranquil and enraged. As far as Lyrak herself is concerned, the Invoker was able to find the Eldworm's residence in the series. He then conjured his Wex orb to separate the waters and reveal the Eldworm's whereabouts underneath them, before enclosing the dragon inside of it. He was able to avoid Lyrak's onslaught and effectively seal her once more with his export orb after she managed to break through the orb in retaliation. She is also an Eldworm herself, and thus Lyrak's soul is immortal. As and when she dies, she will simply inhabit another water dragon body, and the cycle will carry on. Aurak, the Luminous Eldworm. Not much is known about Aurak. The little that we do know is about her powers and the type of Eldworm dragon she is. In fact, throughout the show, we don't really see any luminous dragon hatchling, wormling, or Eldworm for that matter, apart from the one time we see Aurak seated alongside the rest of the Eldworms. The Luminous Eldworm, also known as Aurak or Aurak, is one of the 8 pillars of creation and the essence of the universe. She is equivalent to the Keeper of the Light among the 4 Eldworms that stand in for the 4 fundamental forces, because she is the personification of light. However, she is also the embodiment of the strong nuclear force. She and all other luminous dragons are able to manipulate light, shadow, and nuclear force. Aurak and Aurak are both allusions to her golden essence. Another name for the hue of gold is Or, which is frequently used in heraldry. Her other name, Aurak, may also be derived from Au, the chemical symbol for aurum, the element gold. Just like all the other Eldworms, Aurak's soul is also invincible and doesn't perish. It simply passes from one luminous dragon body to another. Slyrak, the Fire Eldworm. Slyrak is the fire or ember eldworm, otherwise called the Father of Fire. He is the most seen dragon in the entire show, and is portrayed as being a gigantic beast with deep red scales and massive black talons, sharp enough to rip apart a human with a single swipe. He also has a massive wingspan, and the large ruby red wings are a scary sight indeed when one sees them approaching. He is best known for channeling his powers through the blood route and into Davian by spilling both of their blood and enabling them to mix, bonding his soul with Davian's. Slyrak and other fire dragons like him are all capable of breathing fire and are often seen burning entire villages to ash, setting fire to fields and people alike as they massacre and gorge on humans. The fire dragons are often the ones that are most feared by humans and the ones that are etched in popular imagination and folklore as large fire-breathing beasts. In fact, Caden and his fellow dragon knights were once victims of none other than Slyrak himself, as he burnt down an entire village, slaughtering all the dragon knights apart from Caden, who emerged as the sole survivor of the incident. Slyrak, who is also an immortal soul and as seen in the series, prefers to house his soul in the human body of Davian rather than in fire dragons of his kind. He is also the only dragon who enters into a blood bond with a human. Vardrak, the Chaos Eldworm. One of the 8 pillars of creation, Vardrak's soul upholds the cosmos as the Chaos Eldworm. He is one of the 4 Eldworms that represent one of the 4 fundamental forces. He shares the same color scheme and set of abilities as Chaos Knight, but he is actually the weak nuclear force, one of the 4 known fundamental interactions that cause things to decay. Vardrak and the other Chaos Dragons are distinguished by the 3 crimson eyes on their wings. These eyes can be uncovered when the dragon tries to terrify opponents, or while employing some of its elemental powers. They're often hidden and tucked away under their wings. The Chaos Dragons and Vardrak have special talents that set them apart from other creatures. The majority of dragons utilize the elements or forces of nature, but some of them possess abilities that would make them eldritch beings, and these are the Chaos Dragons. It's challenging to even touch these dragons because of their ability to phase out of reality, deflect strikes surrounding them, and teleport small distances by switching between the planes. Caden hunted these dragons specifically for their powers, imbuing a Chaos Dragon's abilities into his armor. Vardrak appears to have the capacity to darken his surroundings before unleashing an expanding surge of red energy in addition to the ability to shift planes. Due to his control over atom decay through the weak contact, this strike is potent enough to dematerialize other Eldworms. Vardrak, like all Eldworms, is immortal in the sense that he can take on new bodies as long as one is available for his spirit to inhabit. After passing away, he locates the subsequent oldest dragon of his species and infuses their empty physical form with his soul. Uldarak, the Earth Eldworm. The Earth Eldworm in Dota Dragon's Blood is named Uldarak. During the What the Thunder Said episode, Davian stumbled across Uldarak's nest, and they were able to put him to sleep. The next day, Fruling, who has been possessed by Terrorblade, kills him instead of Davian honorably putting the dragon to sleep. After taking his soul, Terrorblade later used Uldarak's body to kill him. Ashley Miller, the showrunner, claims that off-screen, Uldarak destroyed the kingdom of Candaness even though he was old and weak. Additionally, he claims that despite having a publicist who helped him spread the word about his abilities, he was simply a time dragon by name and had no connection to time itself. Additionally, he wore a large clock around his neck to complement his newly acquired title and demonstrate his age to others. He and other Earth Dragons often burrow under the earth and have a thorny appearance. Apart from the first episode where we see Davian slay an Earthwormling, they don't appear much during the series. How important are dragons in Dota Dragon's Blood? Considering the fact that Netflix's Dota Dragon's Blood centers around the demon Terrorblade, who embarks on a quest to kill all the elder dragons one by one to collect and harvest their souls so that he may be able to remake all of creation using the powers inside their souls. Dragons are immensely important in this fantasy world. Also, as Davian's soul fuses with one of the Eldworms, Slyrak, the Father of Fire, it's impossible not to acknowledge the crucial role played by Davian and by extension Slyrak as they embark on their quest as a human-dragon hybrid. While the dragons are on occasion beaten by Terrorblade or the Invoker, a mage who does the demon's dirty work for him, as souls and pillars of creation when harnessed by Davian, they lend him the strength to be able to fight the demon. Warning, spoilers ahead. In fact, it's with the help of these Eldworms that Davian finally defeats and kills Terrorblade in the 3rd season. They provide him with immense strength that also changes his entire physiology, making him a man-dragon hybrid much stronger than he was when only Slyrak's soul resided within him. To put it succinctly, dragons are extremely important in this series. If you haven't watched the show yet, you will see a lot of dragons everywhere all the time. If they're not flying around in the sky, then it's Davian the Dragon Knight transforming into one and wreaking havoc on his enemies. All in all, they're an integral part of Dragon's Blood lore. They're even mentioned in the title of the series. The designs that make each dragon visually distinct from all the others are stellar in this show, giving every Eldworm and by extension every type of dragon a distinct personality. Dragons have been portrayed in various pop culture favorites, but the way they're portrayed in Dota Dragon's Blood is probably many people's favorite in a long time. The Eldworms have character and personality, and the existence of dragons in this fantasy world is not just to add a couple of predators to the food chain. They actually have an intrinsic purpose, and that makes them worthwhile. What do you think about the dragons in the series? Which one is your favorite? Let us know in the comments section below. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one. Who are the Eldworms?
Does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig. Spider pig, spider pig. Does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig. Spider pig, spider pig. Does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't.